The alarm clock buzzed at 7 in the morning, but Lisa was already awake. She had been planning this Saturday for 3 weeks now. Her husband David had been working crazy hours as the police chief of their small town, and the kids had been asking every day when they could go to the lake again. Today was finally the day. "Kids, wake up. We're going to Blue Water Lake today," she called down the hallway. The sound of feet hitting the floor told her they were just as excited as she was. 12-year-old Amy was the first one in the kitchen, already dressed in her favorite swimsuit with shorts over it. "Mom, can we bring the inflatable boat?" "Please, of course, honey." "Help me pack the sandwiches while your brother and sister get ready." 10-year-old Jake stumbled in next, his hair sticking up in all directions. "Are we really going to the lake? Dad's not working today?" Lisa smiled and ruffled his messy hair. "Nope, Dad's finally getting a day off. He'll meet us there after he drops off some paperwork at the station." Little Mia, who was 7, appeared in her bright pink swimming suit, dragging her stuffed dolphin behind her. "Can Mr. Bubbles come swimming too?" "Mr. Bubbles can come, but he stays on the blanket, okay? We don't want him to get lost in the water." Lisa had grown up in this town, and Blue Water Lake had been her favorite place since she was smaller than Mia. Her own parents had brought her here every summer weekend. She remembered learning to swim in the shallow area, having picnics on the grassy hill and catching fireflies as the sun went down. Now she was making the same memories with her own children. The lake had an interesting history that made it even more special to their community. About 40 years ago, an elderly man named Mr. Peterson owned all the land around the lake. He had no children of his own, but he loved watching families enjoy the water from his back porch. When he passed away, he surprised everyone by leaving the entire area to the town. His will specifically said he wanted it to be a place where children could play and families could make memories together. The town had taken good care of the gift. They built proper bathrooms, picnic tables, and a small playground. They put up clear signs marking it as a public recreation area and hired someone to keep the grass cut and the trash picked up. During the summer, there was always a lifeguard on duty from 10 in the morning until 6 at night. Lisa loaded their old SUV with everything they'd need for a perfect family day. Beach towels, sunscreen, a cooler full of sandwiches and cold drinks, Amy's inflatable boat, Jake's fishing pole, and Mia's collection of sand toys. She even packed David's favorite chips, hoping he'd be able to stay longer than just an hour or two. The drive to the lake took 15 minutes through their quiet neighborhood. They passed the elementary school where all 3 kids went, the little grocery store where Lisa bought their weekly supplies, and the fire station where David sometimes had meetings with the fire chief. "Look, there's Mrs. Johnson walking her dog," Amy pointed out the window. Mrs. Johnson waved at them and smiled. Everyone in town knew David was the police chief, and people genuinely liked their family. David had grown up here too, and when the old police chief retired, the town council had asked him to take the job. He was fair, kind, and really cared about keeping their community safe. When they arrived at the lake, Lisa felt that familiar peace wash over her. The water was calm and blue, reflecting the white clouds in the sky. A few other families had already claimed spots on the grass, and she could hear children laughing as they played in the water. "Can we get in right now, Mom?" Jake was already pulling off his shirt. "Sunscreen first, then swimming. You know the rules." While Lisa applied sunscreen to squirming children, she noticed a new house on the hill overlooking the lake. It was much bigger than the other homes in the area, with a perfectly manicured lawn and expensive-looking cars in the driveway. Someone had obviously moved in recently, because the house had been empty for over a year. "I wonder who bought the Peterson house," she thought to herself. The locals still called it that, even though Mr. Peterson had been gone for decades. It was the biggest house around the lake, and it had been for sale for a long time because of the high price. The kids ran into the water as soon as they were properly covered in sunscreen. Lisa spread out their large blanket on a flat spot near the water's edge, close enough to watch them but far enough back to stay dry. This was her favorite spot because the kids could play safely in the shallow water, while she could relax and actually read a few pages of her book. Amy, being the oldest, naturally took charge of her younger siblings. She helped Jake blow up the little boat and showed Mia how to build a sandcastle using the lake's sandy bottom. Lisa smiled watching them. These were the moments that made all of David's long work hours worth it. The morning was perfect. The sun was warm but not too hot, There was a gentle breeze coming off the water and her children were happy and safe. Jake caught 2 small fish which he carefully released back into the lake. Amy practiced diving off the small dock that the town had built. Mia collected smooth stones and pretty shells to show her dad when he arrived. Around 11:30, Lisa got a text from David. "Almost done here. Can't wait to see you all. Save me a sandwich." She looked around at their perfect setup and felt grateful for this place. Blue Water Lake wasn't just a place to swim. It was where young couples had their first dates, where families celebrated birthdays with picnics, where teenagers learned to fish with their grandfathers. It was where her own parents had taught her to be confident in the water, and now she was teaching her children the same thing. The lake connected their whole community. Everyone had memories here. Everyone felt ownership of this special place because Mr. Peterson had made it belong to all of them. The town took pride in keeping it clean and safe, and families respected it by following the simple rules and treating it with care. Lisa opened her book and settled in for a relaxing morning. The kids were playing happily, the sun was shining, and soon David would join them for a rare complete family day. She had no idea that their peaceful morning was about to be interrupted in the most unexpected way. As she started reading, she noticed someone walking down from the big house on the hill. A woman in expensive clothes and designer sunglasses was heading toward the water. Lisa smiled and raised her hand in a friendly wave, ready to welcome a new neighbor to their little slice of paradise. The woman walking down from the big house was not returning Lisa's friendly wave. Instead, she was marching with purpose, her expensive heels clicking against the wooden walkway that led from her yard to the water's edge. Everything about her screamed money and attitude, from her perfectly styled hair to her designer handbag that probably cost more than Lisa's monthly grocery budget. Lisa watched her approach, still hoping for a friendly introduction to their new neighbor. Maybe she could tell her about the best spots for fishing, or when the lake was usually least crowded. Small towns were built on neighbors helping neighbors, and Lisa always tried to make newcomers feel welcome. But as the woman got closer, Lisa could see the stern expression on her face. This was not going to be a social visit. "Excuse me," the woman called out sharply when she was still 20 feet away. Her voice cut through the peaceful sounds of children playing and water lapping against the shore. Lisa looked up from her book, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Hi there. Are you our new neighbor? I'm Lisa, and these are my kids. We live just down the road from here." The woman didn't introduce herself or acknowledge Lisa's attempt at friendliness. Instead, she planted herself in front of their blanket like she was about to deliver a lecture. "I need you and your children to leave immediately. This is private property and you're trespassing." Lisa blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "You heard me correctly. This entire lake area belongs to private residents now. Your children are making far too much noise and you don't have permission to be here." In the water, Amy had noticed the tension and was quietly moving closer to shore with her younger siblings. Jake held on to the inflatable boat, unsure whether to keep playing or get out. Little Mia sensed something was wrong and started walking toward her mother, dragging her feet through the shallow water. Lisa stood up slowly, her mind racing. She had been coming to this lake her entire life. Her parents had brought her here. Her grandparents had brought her parents here. The signs clearly marked it as a public recreation area. The town maintained it, cleaned it, and provided lifeguards during busy hours. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is Blue Water Lake Park. It's been public property for decades. There are signs posted right over there." She pointed to the large wooden sign near the parking area that clearly stated, "Blue Water Lake Public Recreation Area, open dawn to dusk, maintained by Parks Department." The woman, who still hadn't given her name, followed Lisa's gesture but dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "I don't care what those old signs say. Things have changed. I live right up there." She pointed to the big house. "And I'm telling you that you need to pack up your things and leave. Now." Lisa felt her stomach tighten. Her children's perfect day was being ruined by someone who was clearly confused about property lines. But she remained calm. Getting into an argument wouldn't help anyone, especially with the kids watching. "I understand you live nearby, and that's wonderful. But this lake has been public since 1983. The previous owner specifically donated it to our town so families could enjoy it. My husband works for the city, and I can assure you that nothing has changed about the ownership." The mention of her husband working for the city seemed to irritate the woman even more. "Oh, So now you're trying to intimidate me, threatening me with your connections? I've dealt with people like you before. You think you can do whatever you want wherever you want because you know someone in the government. Lisa was stunned. She hadn't threatened anyone or tried to intimidate anyone. She was simply trying to explain the facts about a piece of property she had been visiting her entire life. Ma'am, I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just trying to explain that this is public property. Look, there are other families here too. Lisa gestured to the other groups scattered around the lake area. The Johnson family comes here every Sunday after church. The Rodriguez family brings their grandmother here to feed the ducks. This is a community space, but the woman wasn't listening. She had made up her mind and nothing Lisa said was going to change it. I don't care who else thinks they can use my lake. I bought the most expensive house in this area, and I expect to have peace and quiet. Your children have been screaming and splashing for hours. Amy, who had been listening from the water, couldn't stay quiet anymore. At 12, she was old enough to understand that someone was being unfair to her family. We haven't been screaming, lady. We're just swimming. This is where kids are supposed to swim. Don't you dare speak to me, young lady. Where are your manners? Children should be seen and not heard. That was the moment Lisa's patience finally started to wear thin. She could handle someone being confused about property ownership. She could even handle someone being rude to her. But she would not stand by while a stranger spoke harshly to her daughter for politely defending her family. Ma'am, my children are being perfectly respectful. They're playing quietly in a public space exactly as they're supposed to. I think you need to check your facts about who owns this property. The woman's face was getting red now. Whether from anger or embarrassment, Lisa couldn't tell. Don't lecture me about facts. I know exactly what I own and what I don't own. And I know that I don't want you people here anymore. The way she said you people made Lisa's blood run cold. There was something in her tone that suggested this wasn't really about noise or property ownership at all. Ma'am, we have every right to be here. This is public property, maintained with public funds for public use. I'm not moving my family. Fine, the woman snapped, pulling her phone out of her expensive handbag. If you won't leave voluntarily, I'll call the police. They can explain to you about trespassing laws. Lisa watched in disbelief. As the woman dialed 911, she was actually calling emergency services because a family was using a public park on a Saturday morning. Yes, I need police at Blue Water Lake immediately, the woman said into her phone, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. There are trespassers on private property who refuse to leave. There are several children involved, and the parents are being very aggressive and confrontational. Lisa felt her heart racing. She wasn't being aggressive or confrontational. She was sitting on a blanket at a public lake with her 3 children, trying to enjoy a family day out. But now police were being called and her kids were scared and confused. Jake had gotten out of the water and was standing next to Amy, both of them looking worried. Mia had climbed out too and was hiding behind Lisa's legs, clutching her stuffed dolphin. It's okay, babies, Lisa whispered to them. We haven't done anything wrong. This is just a big misunderstanding. But even as she said it, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that this was about to get much worse before it got better. She thought about texting David, but he was probably still dealing with paperwork at the station. The last thing she wanted was to ruin his rare day off with drama. The woman finished her call and stood there with her arms crossed, looking satisfied with herself. The police are on their way. We'll see who's right about this property. Lisa looked around at the other families who had noticed the commotion. Some were pretending not to watch, others were openly staring. She felt embarrassed and frustrated. But mostly she felt sad that her children's happy day had been turned upside down by one person's sense of entitlement. Come on, kids, she said quietly. Let's start packing up our things. Not because we have to, but because I don't want you to have to deal with this anymore. As they began gathering their towels and toys, Lisa couldn't help but wonder who this woman thought she was, and why she felt so confident about calling the police on a family using public property. In about 10 minutes, she was about to find out just how wrong someone could be. 25 minutes earlier, the phone had rung at the police station's dispatch center. Betty Rodriguez had been working dispatch for nearly 15 years, and she knew every street, every landmark, and every regular caller in their small town. When the phone rang on this quiet Saturday morning, she expected it to be something routine like a noise complaint or maybe someone locked out of their car. What's your emergency? The voice on the other end was sharp and demanding, with the tone of someone who expected immediate action. I need police at Blue Water Lake right now. There are trespassers on private property, and they're refusing to leave when I've asked them politely several times. Betty frowned and pulled up the mapping system on her computer. Blue Water Lake was definitely public property. She had grown up swimming there herself, and her own kids had learned to fish off that very dock. But protocol required her to take every call seriously and gather all the information. Can you tell me your name and your exact location, ma'am? My name is Karen Mitchell, and I live at 847 Lakefront Drive. That's the large house directly overlooking the lake. These people have been here since early this morning, and their children are being extremely disruptive. The noise is completely unacceptable. Betty knew the house. It had been empty for over a year until recently. The previous owners had been an elderly couple who loved watching families enjoy the lake from their back porch. They had never complained about anything in all the years Betty had been working dispatch. Ma'am, can you describe the individuals you're reporting? It's a woman with 3 children. The mother is very confrontational and aggressive. When I explained to her that this was private property, she became hostile and started making threats about her connections to the city government. Betty raised an eyebrow. In 15 years of dispatch, she had learned to read between the lines of complaints. Someone who described a polite conversation as confrontational and aggressive usually meant they had been the aggressive one. What kind of threats, ma'am? She said her husband works for the city, and she acted like that gave her special privileges to trespass on other people's property. She's teaching her children that they can break the law and get away with it. Betty was getting a clearer picture now. She had dealt with Karen Mitchell twice before in the past month. Once for a noise complaint about children playing in the street after school, and once because she insisted that her neighbor's dog barking at 6 in the evening was a violation of noise ordinances. Both calls had been unfounded. I understand your concern, ma'am. I'm sending an officer to investigate. Can you stay on the line while I dispatch someone? I'll wait, but this needs to be handled immediately. I pay significant property taxes in this town, and I expect my property rights to be respected. Betty muted her phone and radioed for an available unit. Officer Mike Torres was the closest to Blue Water Lake, about 10 minutes away finishing up a minor traffic stop. Unit 23, are you available for a trespassing complaint? Unit 23 available. What's the location? Blue Water Lake Park. Caller reports trespassing, but Mike... Betty paused, choosing her words carefully since Karen Mitchell was still on the line. The caller seems to believe the park is private property. There was a long pause before Mike's voice came back over the radio. Dispatch, can you confirm the location? Did you say Blue Water Lake Park? The public recreation area? That's affirmative. Caller lives in the house overlooking the lake and believes the park belongs to her. Copy that. I'll be there in about 8 minutes. This should be interesting. Betty unmuted her phone. Ma'am, Officer Torres is on his way. He should be there within 10 minutes. Good. And I want these people arrested for trespassing. I've been more than patient with them. After hanging up, Betty sat back in her chair and shook her head. She had seen plenty of new residents struggle to understand small-town life, but this was different. This felt like someone who had moved to a community and immediately decided that the rules should change to suit her preferences. She pulled up the property, records on her computer to double-check what she already knew. Blue Water Lake and the surrounding parkland had been donated to the town in 1983 by Harold Peterson. The deed was clear and had never been disputed. The town had spent thousands of dollars over the years maintaining the area, building facilities and providing lifeguard services during the summer. Betty also looked up the address Karen Mitchell had given. The house had been purchased 4 months ago for well above market value. The new owner had apparently paid top dollar for what she thought was lakefront privacy, not realizing that the lake itself was public property available to every resident of the town. Meanwhile, Officer Mike Torres was driving toward what he knew would be an awkward situation. He had grown up in this town, graduated from the local high school, and spent countless summer days at Blue Water Lake. His own wedding photos had been taken on the small dock that jutted out into the water. Mike had been a police officer for 8 years, and he had learned that property disputes usually fell into 2 categories. Either there was a genuine boundary confusion that could be resolved with a survey map, or there was one person who believed that owning expensive property gave them control over nearby public spaces. As he drove, Mike thought about the other calls they had received from the Lakefront Drive address. Karen Mitchell seemed to have very different ideas about community life than most people in their town. She had complained about children riding bikes on the public sidewalk in front of her house. She had called about teenagers walking home from school because their conversations were too loud. She had even filed a formal complaint with the city council about the ice cream truck playing music in the neighborhood. Each complaint had been investigated and found to be about perfectly normal legal activities that had been happening in that neighborhood for decades. Mike pulled into the parking area at Blue Water Lake and immediately saw the situation. A woman and 3 children were quietly packing up their picnic supplies, while another woman stood nearby with her arms crossed, clearly waiting for him to take action. He recognized the family packing up their things, though it took him a moment to place them. The woman looked familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen her before. The children were obviously upset, and the youngest one was clutching a stuffed animal and staying close to her mother. The other woman, who must be Karen Mitchell, walked over to his patrol car before he had even gotten out. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. I want those people arrested immediately for criminal trespassing. I've told them repeatedly that this is private property, and they've refused to leave." Mike looked past her to the large wooden sign at the entrance to the park. Blue Water Lake Public Recreation Area. It read in letters large enough to be seen from the parking lot. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Torres. Before we go any further, I need to clarify something. This is Blue Water Lake Park. It's been public property since 1983. Karen's face flushed red. "That's impossible. I live right up there, and I would know if there was public property next to my house. These people are trespassing, and I want them arrested." Mike walked over to the family, who was still packing up their belongings. As he got closer, he realized why the woman looked familiar. He had seen her at community events, always with her 3 well-behaved children. And now he remembered where he knew her from. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely. "I'm Officer Torres. I'm sorry you've been disturbed during your visit to the park. Are you Lisa Chen?" Lisa looked up from folding their blankets, surprised that he knew her name. "Yes, that's me. I'm sorry about all this confusion, officer. I tried to explain to this lady that the lake is public property, but she insisted on calling the police." Mike nodded and checked his notepad, though he already knew what he was going to find there. "And your husband is David Chen?" "Yes, he's supposed to meet us here when he finishes up some work at the station." Officer Torres felt his stomach drop as the pieces fell into place. He looked back at Karen Mitchell, who was standing by his car looking impatient, then back at Lisa and her children. This was about to become a very memorable call for everyone involved. Officer Torres walked back toward Karen Mitchell, his mind working through the best way to handle what was about to become a very awkward situation. In his 8 years on the force, he had dealt with plenty of uncomfortable calls, but this one was going to be memorable for all the wrong reasons. Karen was standing by his patrol car, tapping her foot impatiently and checking her expensive watch. She clearly expected him to march over to the family and start making arrests immediately. "Well?" she demanded as he approached.
"Are you going to arrest them or not?"
"I've been waiting for 20 minutes while they continue to trespass on my property. Ma'am, I need to explain a few things to you. First, this is not your property. Blue Water Lake and the surrounding parkland has been owned by the town since 1983. There are clear signs marking it as public property, and it's maintained by our Parks Department." Karen's face went from annoyed to furious in about 2 seconds. "That's ridiculous. I paid top dollar for lakefront property. I wouldn't have spent that much money if there was going to be a public park right outside my back door. My real estate agent would have told me." Officer Torres pulled out his phone and showed her the town's official website, which had a page dedicated to Blue Water Lake Park. It included photos, a history of the property, and rules for public use. "Ma'am, this information is readily available. The park has been here for over 40 years. Your real estate agent should have made this clear during your purchase." Karen grabbed his phone and stared at the screen, her face getting redder by the minute. "This has to be some kind of mistake. I'm going to sue somebody. I'm going to sue the real estate company, the previous owners, maybe even the town." "That's certainly your right, ma'am. But it doesn't change the fact that this family has done absolutely nothing wrong. They're using public property exactly as it's intended to be used." Karen looked back toward Lisa and the children, who were now sitting quietly on their blanket, unsure whether they should leave or stay. The kids looked scared and confused, which made Officer Torres feel even worse about the whole situation. "Fine," Karen said, handing his phone back roughly. But they're still being disruptive. There are noise ordinances in this town, aren't there? Children shouldn't be allowed to scream and carry on like that. Ma'am, I've been here for 10 minutes and those children have been perfectly quiet the entire time. Normal play activity isn't a violation of any noise ordinance. Well, they were making noise earlier. Lots of noise. Officer Torres looked around the park area. There were 4 other families scattered around the lake, all with children who were playing, swimming, and having normal family fun. The noise level was exactly what anyone would expect at a public park on a sunny Saturday morning. Ma'am, this is a recreation area designed for families. Children playing and having fun is exactly what's supposed to happen here. Karen was running out of arguments, but she wasn't ready to admit defeat. I don't care what it's supposed to be used for. I live here now, and I expect a certain level of peace and quiet. Maybe the rules need to change. That comment finally pushed Officer Torres past his limit of professional patience. Ma'am, the rules don't change because someone new moves to town. This park has been serving our community for decades, and it will continue to serve our community long after you and I are gone. He walked away from her and back toward Lisa's family, leaving Karen standing by the patrol car looking stunned. This was clearly not how she had expected this encounter to go. Mrs. Chen, Officer Torres said as he approached their blanket, I apologize for this disruption to your family's day. You have every right to be here and you've done nothing wrong. Lisa stood up and brushed sand off her shorts. Thank you, Officer Torres. I tried to explain to her that this was public property, but she wouldn't listen. Some people have trouble accepting information that doesn't match what they want to believe, he said, glancing back at Karen, who was now on her phone, probably calling someone to complain about the police department. Amy, who had been quietly listening to the whole conversation, finally spoke up. Officer, why was that lady so mean to us? We weren't doing anything bad. Officer Torres crouched down so he was at eye level with the 12-year-old. Sometimes adults make mistakes, honey. And sometimes when people realize they've made a mistake, they get embarrassed and act even worse instead of just apologizing. Jake, the 10-year-old, was more direct with his question. Is she going to try to make us leave again? No, son. I've explained to her that this is public property and you have every right to be here. If she bothers you again, you tell your mom to call the police station and ask for me specifically. Little Mia, who had been hiding behind her mother during the whole confrontation, peeked out and asked in a small voice, Are we in trouble? No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble at all. You and your brother and sister are perfect examples of how children should behave in public spaces. Officer Torres stood up and turned back to Lisa. Ma'am, I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. Is your husband David Chen the police chief? Lisa nodded, looking a bit confused about why he was asking. Yes, he is. He was supposed to meet us here after he finished some paperwork at the station. Why do you ask? Officer Torres couldn't help but smile, even though the situation was still tense. Well, ma'am, this means that Ms. Mitchell over there just called 911 to report the police chief's family for trespassing in a public park. Lisa's eyes widened as the full irony of the situation hit her. Oh my goodness. She has no idea, does she? No, ma'am, she doesn't. And I have a feeling she's about to be very surprised. As if on cue, they heard the sound of another vehicle pulling into the parking area. Lisa looked toward the entrance and saw David's personal truck. He was still in his uniform shirt, having come straight from the station. David Chen had been the police chief for 6 years, and he was respected throughout the community for his fair and thoughtful approach to law enforcement. He treated everyone with dignity, whether he was dealing with teenagers who had made a mistake or adults who should know better. As he walked toward his family, David could see that something was wrong. His children looked upset, his wife looked stressed, and there was a patrol car parked nearby with one of his officers standing next to their blanket. Hey, family, he called out, trying to keep his voice light for the kids. Everything okay over here? Officer Torres straightened up as his boss approached. Chief, we've had an interesting situation here. What kind of situation? David asked, automatically shifting into work mode while still trying to reassure his children with a smile. Sir, we received a 911 call reporting your family for trespassing in Blue Water Lake Park. David stopped walking and stared at his officer for a moment, processing what he had just heard. I'm sorry, what did you say? The caller lives in that house. Officer Torres pointed to Karen's house on the hill. And she believes that the lake is her private property. She called 911 because your family was using the public park. David looked around the familiar area where he had been bringing his own family for years, then back at Officer Torres. And where is this caller now? Officer Torres nodded toward Karen, who was still standing by the patrol car, now off her phone and watching their conversation with growing curiosity. She's right over there, sir, and she has no idea who you are. David Chen looked at his family, then at the woman who had called the police on them, then back at Officer Torres. In 38 years of life, including 6 years as police chief, he had never been in quite this situation before. Well, he said quietly so the kids couldn't hear, I guess we'd better go introduce ourselves. David Chen walked toward Karen with Officer Torres beside him, his mind still processing the absurdity of the situation. Behind them, Lisa was trying to distract the children by getting them interested in their sandwiches. But all 3 kids were watching the drama unfold with wide eyes. Karen saw the 2 men approaching and immediately straightened up, clearly expecting vindication for her complaint. She had probably spent the last 10 minutes on the phone complaining to someone about how long it was taking to arrest the trespassers. It's about time, she said as they got closer. I hope you're here to finish what Officer Torres started. These people need to be removed from my property immediately. David stopped about 6 feet away from her and studied her face for a moment. He had learned over the years that how people reacted when they discovered they were wrong told you everything you needed to know about their character. Ma'am, I'm Chief David Chen with the Millbrook Police Department. He didn't offer to shake her hand. I understand you called 911 to report a trespassing incident. Karen's attitude immediately became more respectful when she realized she was talking to the police chief himself. Yes. Chief Chen, thank you for coming personally. I've been having an ongoing problem with people who think they can use my lakefront property whenever they want. Today's incident is just the latest example. Ma'am, I need to correct something right away. This is not your property. This is Blue Water Lake Park, and it's been public property since 1983. Officer Torres explained this to you already. Karen's face flushed again, but she pressed on. There has to be some mistake in the record somewhere. I paid premium prices for lakefront privacy. My real estate agent assured me that I would have exclusive access to the water. Ma'am, your real estate agent was either mistaken or dishonest, but that doesn't change the legal status of this property. What it does change is your understanding of what you purchased. David's tone was professional but firm. He had dealt with plenty of people who thought money could change facts, and he had no patience for it. But surely there's something that can be done, Karen continued. I mean, I'm a significant taxpayer now. Don't I have some say in how public property near my house is used? Ma'am, every citizen has input into how public property is managed. You can attend town council meetings, volunteer for parks committees, or run for office yourself. What you can't do is call 911 because families are using public facilities. Karen was starting to realize that this conversation wasn't going the way she had planned, but she still wasn't ready to admit she was wrong. Well, regardless of the ownership issue, those children were being excessively loud. Surely there are noise ordinances that apply here. Ma'am, I've been standing here for 15 minutes and those children have been perfectly well behaved the entire time. Normal recreational activity in a public park is not a noise violation. David glanced back at his family. Lisa was now letting the kids get back in the water, trying to salvage what was left of their family day. Amy was helping little Mia build a sandcastle, while Jake was carefully relaunching his inflatable boat. Besides, David continued, the family you called the police on happens to be my family. The words hung in the air for a moment while Karen processed what she had just heard. Your family? She repeated, her voice getting smaller. Yes, ma'am. That's my wife Lisa and my 3 children Amy, Jake, and Mia. You called 911 to report the police chief's family for using a public park. The color drained from Karen's face as the full impact of her mistake became clear. She had not only been wrong about the property ownership, she had also been rude and demanding to the police chief's family. I didn't know, she stammered. I mean, how was I supposed to know who they were? Ma'am, it wouldn't have mattered if they were my family or anyone else's family. They were using public property appropriately, and they had every right to be here. Officer Torres, who had been quietly watching this exchange, decided it was time to address the bigger issue. Chief, this is actually the 3rd call we've received from this address in the past month. Previous complaints about children playing in the street and normal neighborhood activities. David raised an eyebrow and looked at Karen, who was now clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. Is that accurate, ma'am? Have you been calling the police department frequently since moving here? I just expect a certain standard of peace and quiet. I paid a lot of money to live in a nice neighborhood. Ma'am, you moved to a family-friendly community with a public park, public schools, and children who play outside. If you wanted complete isolation, you should have bought property in a more remote location. David's patience was wearing thin. It was one thing to make an honest mistake about property boundaries. It was another thing entirely to move into a community and immediately start trying to change everything to suit your personal preferences. I think we need to have a clear understanding about a few things. David continued. First, this is public property and it will remain public property. Families will continue to use it for recreation, just as they have for 40 years. Second, calling 911 for non-emergencies is a misuse of emergency services and can result in fines. Third, harassing people who are lawfully using public facilities is not acceptable behavior. Karen was looking more uncomfortable by the minute, but she still wasn't ready to accept full responsibility for her actions. I wasn't harassing anyone. I was simply trying to protect my property rights. Ma'am, you approached my family and demanded that they leave a public park. When they politely explained that they had a right to be there, you called the police. That's harassment. Officer Torres pulled out his notepad and looked at David. Chief, how do you want me to document this call? David thought for a moment. He could write this up as a false report, which might teach Karen a lesson about wasting police resources. He could cite her for harassment, which would send a clear message about how the community treats families using public spaces. But ultimately, he decided that the embarrassment and education might be enough. Document it as an unfounded complaint due to caller misunderstanding property ownership. Make sure to note that this is the third questionable call from this address, and recommend that the caller research municipal codes before making future reports. Yes, sir. David turned back to Karen one final time. Ma'am, I strongly suggest you take some time to learn about your new community before making any more complaints. Attend a town council meeting, visit the library and read about local history. Talk to your neighbors about how things work here. But stop calling the police about normal community activities. Karen nodded, clearly eager for this conversation to end. I understand. I'm sorry for the confusion. Ma'am, you should apologize to my wife and children, not to me. They're the ones whose day you disrupted. Karen looked toward Lisa and the kids, but she didn't move to approach them. Instead, she mumbled something about being sorry and started walking back toward her house, her expensive heels clicking on the wooden walkway. David watched her go, then walked back to his family. The kids ran to him immediately, and he hugged all three of them at once. Dad, that lady was really mean to us, Mia said, still clutching her stuffed dolphin. I know, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes they don't handle it very well when they realize they're wrong. Are we still having our family day? Jake asked, looking worried that the confrontation had ruined everything. Absolutely, David said, pulling off his uniform shirt to reveal the t-shirt he was wearing underneath. I'm officially off duty and we're going to have the best lake day ever. Lisa walked over and gave her husband a hug. I handled that okay, right? She asked quietly. I tried to stay calm for the kids. You were perfect, David said, kissing the top of her head. You were patient and polite even when she didn't deserve it. Over the next few hours, the Chen family had their perfect lake day after all. David helped Jake catch 3 more fish, played in the water with all the children, and even convinced Lisa to go for a swim. Other families at the park came over to say hello, and several people mentioned that they had witnessed the earlier confrontation. Good for you for standing up to her, said Mrs. Williams, whose grandchildren were playing on the playground. We've all been getting tired of her complaints about everything. As the afternoon wore on, David noticed that Karen appeared at her back window several times, watching the families enjoying the lake. He wondered if she was beginning to understand what she had given up by choosing conflict over community. 6 months later, Karen Mitchell quietly put her house up for sale. The real estate listing mentioned nearby recreational activities as a feature, finally acknowledging what had always been true about the property. The Chen family continued their tradition of spending Saturday mornings at Blue Water Lake, where David taught other children how to fish, and Lisa organized informal reading groups under the shade trees. The lake remained what it had always been, a place where the community came together, where children learned to swim and families made memories. And every time they visited, they were reminded that standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, is always worth it in the end.